Hello, we are back with another design clips here at W+9. This is Dawn Woolslegel, and today's card is probably one of my favorites in a while. It features one of my favorite techniques, and that is ink blending. So we are going to be using distress inks and a little bit of water today to create magic. So I'm going to be using the Tim Holtz Distress watercolor cardstock. That is my favorite to use with the distress inks, and I will be using Abandoned Coral, Spiced Marmalade, mustard seed, twisted citron, and peacock feathers. And I'm probably going to throw in, I'm going to throw in a little bit of a deeper red, festive berries. So this has a smooth side and a rough side, and we're going to be working on the smooth side. I'm going to be using a mini ink blending tool here, and I'm going to start with my Abandoned Coral, and I'm going to be moving in rainbow order. So Roy G. Biv, minus the violet. I'm not a huge fan of purple. However, you'll notice that my nails are actually lavender today. Purple happens to look really good on me. It's like my color to wear, which is very unfortunate since I don't really care for the color. But so be it. So anyways, back to the card. I'm covering the entire background with color, working from the red all the way down to the blue. I'm not worried about getting a very smooth transition because, like always, I'm going to come in with water and really add some texture to the background anyway. So I'm just going to continue to build up the color, adding a layer after layer of color. I'm going to start with my red, then I'll blend that into the orange, into the yellow, into the green, into the blue. And then anywhere that I need to soften the transition or I want to create a new color, I will come back in and overlap again with the original color. So basically, you can just go to town. You can put your colors in any order that you want. You don't have to go in rainbow order. The only thing you want to make sure of is that you don't overlap opposite colors. If you overlap your opposite colors, you'll end up with brown. Red and green, don't want to overlap those. Orange and blue, try not to overlap those. So anywhere that I know that those colors are coming close together, I'll come in with a mediating color and kind of close them off at the gap so that I don't end up with a mucky, yucky brown. The wonderful thing about this technique is you can make it as light or as intense as you want it. I am going to be coming back and forth, adding several layers of color because I want this to be very intense and very bright. I'm going to be doing some white heat embossing over top of it, so I really want that white to pop. So you can see here I'm coming back in with that peacock feathers and intensifying that. And I'll continue to do the same with all of the colors until I get just the right amount of depth that I'm looking for. And with that all done, it's now time to come in and add that texture. Now I'm going to be using water from an aqua brush. You could use whatever you're most comfortable with, whether that be a glass of water and a regular brush. I just find this really easy because I can squeeze the water from the brush straight onto the paper. And I'm being very liberal with the water here. This is a case where more is more. So I'm going to squeeze that brush out onto the cardstock. I'm going to start at the edges, notably at the corners for this. I'm just going to squeeze that water out and then push it onto the paper, pushing it toward the center of the paper. Whatever's left on the brush, I'm going to flick onto the cardstock just to break up those edges so that it looks a little more organic. And in some spots, I'm going to come in further toward the center than in others. You'll notice that I'm not pulling this up with a paper towel right away. If I allow this to dry naturally, the color is going to be much softer. And if I pull it up with a paper towel, it's going to pull up all of that reactivated ink and I'll get much whiter areas of color. So for this first layer, I'm going to let this start to dry naturally and it'll be much softer. Now later stages, I will put water down and then immediately pull it up with a paper towel, which will cause whiter spots. So this is going to add a lot of variation in that background, and it's going to look gorgeous with that white heat embossing on top. And here you can see the difference. When I use the paper towel to pull up that excess water and ink, I'm left with much more defined, whiter, brighter areas. And once I'm happy with how this looks, I'm going to let it dry and then I can move on to my heat embossing. Now you could use whatever images you want. I'm going to be using our Autumn Leaves stamp set. I love this stamp set. It's definitely one of my favorites. And I'm stamping my images in Versamark and then I'm going to heat emboss them with Hero Art's white heat embossing powder. Hero Art's white embossing powder. All right, so I'm going to stamp down a couple at a time. Now I've already got this paper that I've covered in water. I've let it air dry, so it's not intensely warped yet. If you let your paper air dry, it usually will dry flatter than if you use your heat tool. So I let it air dry. Now I'm going to be adding heat from my heat tool, which will warp it. So if the less times I can apply heat to this, the better. So I'm going to stamp out quite a few of these leaves, and then I'm going to heat emboss them at once. Now, you'll notice you keep seeing my head peek in there with a hat on. I apologize. I forgot that I was wearing a hat, and when I'm wearing a hat, it comes in closer. It intrudes in the frame more than if I'm not wearing a hat, obviously, because of the bill. However, we have that tropical storm coming, and the weather has just been horrendous, and it just makes no sense for me to even do my hair. So I've been wearing a hat, and I apologize. Hopefully it doesn't bother you too much. So I'm just going to keep filling this up, stamping out a couple of leaves, covering it with embossing powder, and then hitting it with the heat tool to melt it. And you see how gorgeous that looks. Oh. I'm telling you, this has got to be one of my favorite cards I've done in a while. It's a very simple technique. Super, super simple, right? But I don't know, the contrast of the colors, the variation and the interest in the background, there's just something about it that gets me every time. Okay, so now it is time to die cut this. I'm going to be using this rounded frame from our Love Mom Layers die. It's going to add that faux stitching to the background. And now we are ready to add our sentiment. For that, I'm going to be using the That Is All stamp set. I'm going to be stamping it using our pure color dye ink in black, and then die cutting it with the matching companion die. And these happen to be another one of my favorite products, the That Is All stamp set and companion dies. I use them all the time. They're just like the perfect staple sentiment set. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is just finish off this sentiment. And for that, I'm going to stamp the I Think You're, which is also in the That Is All stamp set, in Versamark onto black cardstock. And then I'm going to heat emboss it using Wow's Superfine Bright White Opaque Embossing Powder. I'm going to put a little fishtail notch in the end of this, creating a little banner. And then I'm going to adhere that to the front of my card using a little foam tape. And then I will mount this entire panel onto a top folding A2 card base. And that will finish up this card. So like I said, this is one of my favorite techniques. It's super simple, very easy, almost foolproof, and it's just a great foundation technique to start any card with. You can use any colors you want, have fun playing around with it. Here's one that I created. This one I've added some picked raspberry and some seedless preserves. There's a little scattered straw in there and some salty ocean. I really hope you guys enjoyed this card as much as I enjoyed making it, and let me know in the comments below if you love this technique. Is it one of your go-to techniques? Remember, you can find all of the supplies in the description box below as well as on our blog, and you can find all the featured stamps at wplus9.com. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!